who I am. So the last time I was in this room was during my interview. So I'll try not to be as nervous as I was when I did that. So, but anyway, folks, thank you very much for coming out today. Over the last couple of weeks, as we have worked on dealing with the audit and some of the information that has come out from that, one of the suggestions that John Currie made was it would be good to have an open forum so that people can ask questions about what sort of things that we're doing, what kind of information we have ahead, and what our next steps are. And I think that was an excellent idea. So today I'm going to make a few very brief opening comments, and really the intention here is for you all to have the ability to ask questions, express your concerns or anything like that. And the two of us are going to be up here and do the best we can to answer those particular questions. So both of us have received a significant number of electronic mail notes, people expressing frustration, disappointment. I'll keep my language clean. Those words are probably the best to describe some of what we've gotten, and we're both taking the time to respond to each of those individually and over time. So if any of you in here have sent notes and say, well, how come I didn't get a response back? It takes a while to actually respond and read 350 or more email notes. So we continue to get more each day, and we're trying to make sure that we're being responsive to the K-State community. As I said in my note to campus this last week, we were very supportive of the audit being released. Generally speaking, I was very concerned that the ideas of what were in the audit were far worse, perhaps, than what was actually in there. And so there was sort of a conspiracy going that, wow, there's all kinds of hidden stuff out there. And I think we wanted to see the audit released so everybody could sort of look at it, and then we could start solving some of the problems identified. So over the next couple of weeks, what I'm going to do is meet with different groups on campus. I'll meet with the Faculty Senate Executive Group. We're going to meet with our Student Executive Group that's here, meet with our Staff Executive Group. We're doing this open forum. We've got emails. And basically what we want to hear is a lot of comments and feedbacks and suggestions about things that we need to be doing. The second thing is we're going to form, for lack of a better term, a campus, a group to help us react to the audit and help prepare the statements and report back to the Board of Regents that I've been tasked to give by October 1st. And that's got to involve faculty, it's got to involve staff, it's got to involve students, it's got to involve some people from outside of campus that's going to basically help respond appropriately to the issues identified with specific solutions and things that need to take place. So what we're doing now is we're really in an information gathering mode. And that's what we're trying to do, is make sure that we're hearing as much feedback as we can out there. And to be honest, while John and I may not have had much to do or anything to do with the situation that we're in, you all need to count on us as leading athletics and me leading the university that we're going to respond in an appropriate fashion, and we're going to make sure that we can restore some financial credibility of the institution with the world at large. And just quick statistic, of all our donors to the institution, approximately 80% give to academics. So we don't have this huge donor base that just gives to athletics. If most of you, if you name the names of folks that you say, oh, they're big donors to athletics, I can point to endowed chairs and things they've done in athletics. I'm sorry, on the academic side. So the point here is, you can look and say, well, it's a different area of campus, but whether it's a different area or not, it's a credibility issue that goes across all of us, and that's why it's really important that we take those folks and everybody out there that feels comfortable that we're not going to put ourselves in this situation again. So with that being said, John and I are here to answer any questions or concerns, things that you might have. What we'll do is ask you, because this is being streamed, to come up if you've got a question or comment to the microphone, just simply so everybody can hear it, and then we'll do the best we can at responding back and forth to questions or concerns or things that you think we need to be taking account of. So folks, I really appreciate during the summer, I know you got lots of things to do, but we felt this was necessary and important. And if nobody has any questions or comments, then we'll all go back to our offices, and I'll do the presidential web surfing that constitutes most of my day. You all can do the important things that you all need to be doing, teaching, research, and engagement. So with that, folks, I'd love to open up the floor for questions. Last comment before I forget. Somebody did email me, and they asked specifically. He said, well, Kirk, the audit was done for your benefit coming in as the new president. Certainly you must have seen it. Folks, I saw it at exactly the same time the news media saw it about a week ago. So this was not something that I sort of had seen out there for months and couldn't say anything about it. I simply had not seen the audit until you all did, so I spent a very enjoyable Friday afternoon reading through the 6-point type and the 30 pages of information that's there. So with that being said, folks, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Well, thank you very much for being here.
And another thing, I parked in one of those construction spots by the parking garage out there, so if anybody sees a truck being towed away, let me know.
How often do you expect to be audited now? This has happened. Board of Regents going to say we need an audit more than once every 22 years or 23 years? Can you repeat the question?
I'm sorry, I was just wondering how often you expect to be audited now. As far as, I know that this audit was the result of a new president coming in. Can we anticipate that this is going to be an annual thing now, or semi-annual, or every 5 years?
I think the Board of Regents is still trying to decide what frequency that they want to do audits on. We have lots of areas of campus that are audited on a pretty regular basis anyway. I think the real issue in my mind is not necessarily having an external group and come in and do an audit. It's, are we making the best financial decisions that we can? In other words, the audit may go, you didn't do anything wrong, you made dumb decisions, but you didn't do anything wrong. And so part of it is not just having somebody come in and check our balance sheets and all that stuff. I think those are actually, to be honest, the easier things to correct because they tend to be business practice oriented. And we can put those in place. But we also need to make sure that we're making the smartest, wisest decisions that are in the best interest of the university, and not just John, Currie, and myself sitting down over a cold beverage in Aggieville deciding how we're going to do something. We now have a broader group of individuals, so we have a new structure to the athletic corporation, so that Bruce Schubert, our CFO, Pete out of the attorney's office is sitting there. It's the athletic director, the provost. It's a group of folks that are not all working for the athletic department that are going to sit around and for multi-year contracts and things like that. And that group's got to approve those. So we've tried to put some things in place also. It doesn't mean that a group of 10 people can't make a dumb decision, but it makes it a lot harder. And so what we want to do is just put some best practices in place. So I don't really, to me, it doesn't make a lot of difference how often the regents would like to do an audit. That's fine, and we're happy to have the accountability. But basically, too, it's not just the accountability, it's we've got to make the wise decisions that you all should expect from the university leadership team.
Yeah, with regards to that oversight committee that you were just discussing.
Okay, with regards to the oversight committee that you were just discussing, my question regards the constitution of that committee. To me, it seems somewhat like corporate America, in which you're on the board of directors for my corporation, I'm on the board of directors for your corporation, and then we both vote each other large bonuses and go out and play golf and run our companies into the ground. My problem with the committee was that it seemed like there were provosts on the committees, university attorneys, but I think it would be better if you had a wide spectrum of people from the whole university committee. I didn't notice that there were any students on the committee. I didn't notice any ordinary faculty on the committee that weren't in administrative positions. I didn't notice that there were any alumni or local residents on the committee. What about making this committee truly representative of the K-State community?
don't mean shirking any responsibility. I think that's an excellent question. The new Kansas State Athletics Incorporated structure has a 6-person board, which includes myself as athletics director. The secretary-treasurer of the board is the vice president for finance administration. There's an appointee of the provost, an appointee of the president, the vice president for student life, and the faculty athletics rep, who is by definition a faculty member. Then in addition, there is a president's advisory committee on intercollegiate athletics that will meet by some frequency each year. And that president's advisory committee has that multi-representational group that you talk about right there. In that, as we meet with that group, the same type of reporting and financial reports, academic performance updates, compliance updates, student athlete welfare updates will be provided to that group with the opportunity for that group to provide feedback and advice to the president.
I think the group that we want to put together to help us with the audit, if they choose to make some recommendations so that needs to be expanded, I think we would certainly look upon that, because John and I have been in front of several donors and people like that have expressed a similar concern and saying, well, Kirk, there's nobody sort of from the outside that, and one person actually said, well, guess what? All of those people report to the president, so would they be really willing to stand up and take something that I might think is a great idea and say, this is bad, knowing that I could fire them after the meeting?
At the same time, I would say that, your question basically is, can the people on that executive board be co-opted?
Right.
Is your question. And I believe that history shows that different places and different universities, different corporations, whether someone is inside or outside, the opportunity to be co-opted exists depending on the culture of the organization. What we will do, regardless of the structure, regardless of the makeup, is we will operate in a very open and transparent fashion. We'll be happy to come up if you want to. If people could come down to these microphone stands, that'd probably be most convenient for everybody to be able to see.
I'll try to follow directions here.
Yes, sir.
The previous administration had shown a facility improvement plan, a capital campaign for athletics. I believe the number bandied was like $77 million. Expansion of Brownridge Coliseum, a visitor center, a museum, ticket office, ground level, maybe some expansion on the Snyder Family Stadium. Is that going to go forward? Are we putting that on hold? Are we just going to look at the whole plan over again? What's happening with that?
Thank you. You referred to what was, I guess, commonly referred to as the Wildcat Victory Campaign. Currently, those projects are on hold. There are some of those projects that we'll reevaluate, and we're in the process of starting to do that right now. Frankly, I've been here 3 weeks as of last night, and while all those projects, as they were originally conceived, have some varying degree of importance, some are probably very critical, some maybe not as critical, we certainly cannot build anything if we do not have dollars to pay for it. And so generally, kind of a fundamental principle of mine is that when we have facilities that generate revenue in themselves, i.e. if you have suites or club seats, those facilities actually generate dollars. You can tie revenue streams specifically to those facilities. Sometimes with facilities like that, you can borrow money and do long-term bonds, etc. As a principle, it is my preference to avoid bonding indebtedness on facilities that do not by themselves generate revenue. So the long answer to your short question is that we really have to assess what our revenue generation and fundraising capacity before we go headlong into those projects. However, I will say this: we've been blessed here over time, based upon my evaluation. We have some pretty good stuff, and yet we also have some areas where we show our wear, and that would be across campus, as you said earlier in your email today. So we're not going to sit and just stand down and give up right now. But what I can assure you is that when we do operate aggressively moving forward, we'll be very prudent in how we operate.
Thank you both for being here today. Not only the athletics issues, but some of the other problems that have come out with the audit have involved what could be broadly seen as the land grant mission, and conflict of interest involving some of our engagement activities, our economic development activities, and a lot of conflict of interest. I think I have two questions. One of them is, President Schulz, what else do you need to know? Some of the national press reports have indicated that the audit team did not receive all of the information that they would have liked to receive. Is there information that you still need to know? And if so, if you believe so, how are you going to get it?
Sure. Some of the engagement issues that you were referring to specifically relate to NISTAC, her technology outreach arm. And when I visited with some of the folks at NISTAC, and we're going to have some information that will come out for the media over the next several days, but generally speaking, we're going to bring in an external firm to do some audit work. And I think that's generally being welcomed by the folks there because they don't feel that things were reported accurately in the Grant Thornton report. Now, you know, I don't have really a strong stand there except to say, let's go in and get some additional answers to those things, and I think at the end we're going to find that some of that there wasn't enough analysis done on the broad audit, and we're going to make those documents public. So this is the kind of thing that audits are what they are. You know, they're going to come in, do some sort of homework and information, and put them out, and we're going to use that to ensure that we make things better, that we can improve our policies, we do things like this. But we probably are going to have to make some fundamental changes in the way we do a few things. And so, for example, I'm particularly sensitive to the president of the university being involved in boards and things like that. I think, you know, if it's a board in Virginia and it's got nothing to do with the university, you can ask, is that really a worthwhile thing to do? But that certainly doesn't have conflict of interest. And I think probably for the next several years, anything that even has a small color difference that doesn't look quite right, I'm going to have to, and my executive team is going to have to just sort of stay away from those kind of things because maybe it conforms to the letter of the law, but it doesn't pass a good smell test. And we're going to probably be overly sensitive to that, appropriately so it doesn't look like that we're getting in there and these kind of things come up with a new administration in some number of years. So bottom line, we're going to continue to investigate, and I think to have credibility, even though we've got some gifted people here who could do a great job, we've really got to have some people outside of campus. Otherwise, people say, well, sure, they found there was nothing there. Well, of course they did because, you know, they just went in to try and find that. So we're very attuned to that we got to do something that you are going to look at and go, okay, this is credible. Did you have another question? I thought did you have two things?
That was two.
Oh, okay. I tend to forget. I get talking and then I think, anyway.
My question, I guess, comes as a taxpayer. And when I look at that audit and I see how money is funneled into corporations rather than going through HRIS and being paid out that way, when I see that there's paid trips for families, when I see that there's double billing for events, the country club that mentioned, what is it that you have in mind to do to ensure accountability for that, to ensure that there's a good systems of checks and balances so those kinds of things don't happen? Have you had time to think about that and to determine what the best way to do to prevent that kind of double paying and those kinds of things?
We're still thinking about some of those sorts of things, and so I really don't have a wonderful answer for some of the business-related things about the double payments and so on. I think, though, John and I both made a commitment to make sure that the expenses that we incur be reviewed by somebody outside of our offices. So I'm going to ask somebody in the Board of Regents office to review the expenses that come out of our office, the President's office, because I need somebody outside of campus to look and say, okay, this is credible and you're handling things in the appropriate fashion and all that kind of stuff. John's made a commitment and he can comment on this as well. To be honest, we've only had about 10 or 11 days, and some of that stuff we still need to go in and check and make sure that they didn't happen to just find a couple instances. But I don't worry so much, to to be honest, if it's a double payment on something that's $10 or $15, that just in the grand scheme of things, sometimes those kind of things are going to happen. But some of the numbers in there were kind of large, and I would think, it's a little disconcerting that we would pay twice for something that was quite large. So a lot of that is making sure we've got 2 layers of sign off on things and stuff like that, so we don't do the quick and easy deal, which is, that person's not around, we sign something in 2 places and we send it on, and there's not somebody checking and going, you know what, I know we paid this last month, that kind of a thing. So sometimes it's the policies are there, it's just we get we're in a hurry and we just need to get it done and that kind of stuff, and we just need to make sure that we're actually following the guidelines that are there and put in place for good reason, and having 2 people look at things on any sort of payment. So that's my initial quick reaction, but I'll tell you, a month from now or 2 months from now, I'll probably have a much more thorough answer to that as we learn a bit more about how some of that happened.
I would just speak to a few things that we will do in athletics and have already started doing in athletics. That some of these may be new procedures, some of them may not be new procedures in athletics, but we will follow them going forward and already have been following them. President Schulz alluded to one already. Any expense incurred by the athletics director, whether I take somebody to dinner or on a trip or I go on a trip or whatever, all my expenses that I generate personally will be approved periodically by the Vice President for Administration and Finance. And that'll be standard operating procedure. Additionally, in athletics, for a period yet to be determined, but probably at least for 12 months, I personally will sign all expenditure purchase orders and expense approvals, etc. And to give you an example of something like that, I ended up with a big stack of them on my desk on Friday, and so I was going through them Friday night, and there were 3 in a row. One was for directories from the National Association of High School Coaches, and it's about this big, and it has all the high school coaches in the nation listed in there from all sports. And it was an open purchase order to purchase, I can't remember how many cases, 100 or 150 of the things or 200 of the things. Well, and then there was one for the NCAA manual, and then there was one for the National Association of Collegiate Directory of Athletics directories. It added up to about $10,000 worth of books. Well, frankly, until I got that invoice, I never knew we paid for that directory of high school coaches, because when I was at Tennessee, somebody put a new one in my inbox every single year. And every single year, I took the cellophane off it and put it up on the shelf and took the one from last year and put it in the recycling bin. Never opened the thing. I don't need one. Now, some of our coaches absolutely need one. The same thing with NCAA manually. We're ordering 110 of them. Now, we want to follow the rules, and so the absence of a handy NCAA manual is not an excuse for not following the rules. So we do need a number of those things. And the same thing with the directory of the athletic departments. But that is an example for me. I personally saw that we were going to spend $10,000 on books. We collected the $10,000 $35 at a time from fans that bought football tickets. And so is one of those books worth what some fans spent Saturday working extra to buy that book? To buy that book for us, is it really worth it? And in that case, our staff went back and we're going through now, and we'd probably order $4,000 worth of books instead of $10,000 worth of books. So that's an example of the type of level of detail that we're going to get into in our athletics budget to make sure that we are being very frugal about every single dollar that we manage. Some of the additional steps we're taking in athletics on our athletic contracts, we certainly will have the legal office review all athletic contracts. I think it's important, and I want that because I'm not a lawyer, and I want to make sure that I don't inadvertently put the university and the Athletics Corporation at risk by having a bad contract out there that's not favorable to the institution and the Athletics Corporation. And then in addition, at a certain dollar level on expenditures and checks, etc., in addition to me, the Vice President will sign off on those checks. My initial reaction was I want him to sign off on everyone, but I'm not sure if it's the best use of the university's time and if it doesn't exempt me from my personal responsibility to have him having to sign off on every pack of paper or football we buy. Thank you.
Well, many of us were saddened by some of the things that we read in the report, and one thing that angered me, and I'm sure a lot of people here, was the contract, secret contract signed with Coach Prince. You may not be able to answer this question. Is there a snowball's chance that can be declared null and void, that contract? Is the university vigorously working to see that, do all they can to avoid that contract?
Since our university attorney is sitting right here, I can tell you that he's asked us not to comment on that. So,
But if you look at the guy, you can tell.
in all seriousness, that's just an issue we can't really comment on because lots of comments by us and the media may not necessarily help the university's position. So we'll just have no comment on that.
I just wanted to express displeasure on behalf of a lot of people here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted, well, thank you for being here. I wanted to ask really simply, the university's taken a big hit in terms of public relations. And hopefully when the KU audit comes out, we will.
Is that the misery love company approach?
I'm hoping something happens like Michael Jackson's funeral to take the, the heat off. So the point is, though, that what are we planning to do collectively, not just you, what are we planning to do to rebuild confidence out there with the person who may not know all the details of what's going on?
Yeah, I think there's several things on rebuilding the confidence. One is there's got to be a strong leadership position and stance taken by the president's office and the athletic director on what it is that we tend to do. Okay, that's one. Second, we've got to keep communications open, whether people like the email notes or not. We've got to keep putting out that sort of stuff because as a faculty member, the most frustrating thing or alumnus I ever saw was I read everything in some newspaper and thought, how come I'm not at least getting something from our highly paid administrators? So I think those are two key things. And third, we've got to be thorough in our investigation so that it doesn't look like, well, once it left the newspapers, Kirk and John and the rest of the vice presidents all went off and did something else and didn't really follow through on it. So I think it's really those kind of things. And then the last and final thing, we've had several people communicated with either athletics and certainly my office and said, I'm never giving another penny to the institution. I've pulled my gift and I'm sending it to whatever, things like that. What I'm asking all of those folks is say, I'm asking one thing, give us a year. And a year from now, I want you to look at K-State and whether you donate to athletics, you donate to chemical engineering or whatever, look at the university, see the impact that things are doing, and if you don't feel in a year that we're making better use of your resources, then give it to a charity that you feel passionate about, and whoever that is. So I think it's unfair to say to somebody or anybody, we're going to restore credibility in 6 weeks. We're not. But I do think we say after a year, I think people will look and they're going to be proud of where the university is going, the job that you all do teaching and educating our students, and we'll get beyond some of these things, especially if people feel we put accountability measures in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. So, burn me once, burn me twice kind of a deal. We want to make sure that we're really careful with that. So it's going to be graduated, but one of the things that might be tempting is for us to burrow down and sort of say, we're just going to let the storm pass over. And the problem with that is it does keep us out of the news media, but I don't think it addresses the issues, and I think people are going to want to see that. So that's my plan as president, is to keep communications open, work through, involve the campus community in coming up with some permanent solutions to the things in preparation for October. And as we know things, we're going to continue to put them out, even if they don't make us look great, because I think everybody appreciates the fact that we're willing to put it all out there so everybody can see it. So that's the steps we plan to take.
Anybody else? A lot of questions.
That's all right. I won't cut the funding to the sustainability program, but don't worry about it. So, okay, I've got a question. people the president knows on campus. Anyway.
One of the problems with athletic funding and Big 12 conference that previous athletic directors refer to as the arms race. So-and-so expands the locker room, so-and-so adds to the stadium. We certainly appreciate that. And the Big 12 band directors or Big 12 other departments get together and compare, and in some of these areas, K-State's also at the bottom of that list. I'm not so concerned as to where we are. I'm concerned about, do we have enough?
Let me answer that first, and I'll let their athletics director represent that second. No matter what we have, we can always do more. And one of the reasons that coaches and faculty are successful is they're almost never willing to accept the status quo. You know, if we grow our research enterprise to $200 million and build 5 new buildings with beautiful labs and classroom facilities, all of you know there'll be somebody says we need a better lab, we need a bigger one, we need more space. So part of what I think has to occur is we're going to bring aggressive people in there regardless of where they work across the institution who are going to demand better facilities and things like that. However, I think there's a limit, and we have to also, we may not have the biggest, but we can certainly have some of the best facilities for a university of our size. And so I think we always sort of have to ask ourselves, is this something that we need? Is this something that we want? Do we really have to have it? And they all fall into those different categories, and sometimes that's what you need to expect from your university leadership, is we ought to be saying, hey, you may want it, but this is not going to be in the grand priority of things, whether that's a basketball practice facility or expanded stadium or a new classroom building or a renovated, you know, this or that. So we've got to be responsible about doing that. But it's not just being responsible. We have to communicate effectively so you all know what that priority list is. So there are some needs in athletics, and I'll let John talk about that we probably need to do. But we've got lots of needs across the rest of campus that we need to do as well. And as president, I have to make sure that we're balancing when we go ask people for money and resources to do things. You know, we may have the world's most wonderful facilities over here, but if our classroom buildings are crumbling, I'm not balancing things out in an appropriate fashion.
With our the athletics development program, fundraising program, that program had already begun to centralize with the foundation's activities and the university's activities and the alumni association's activities, and that will absolutely continue. I come from a centralized development model at both the two previous institutions I worked for, and we'll continue to do that and prioritize requests for the institution's overall priorities, and most importantly, the interests of the donor and what the donor wants to feels most passionate about. And we'll talk about finding the passion of the donors in supporting research or whatever it is we're doing in athletics. As far as arms race, I think the president articulated it very well. There is a consumer-driven arms race in everything in America, whether it is hotels, and you think about what a typical budget hotel has now versus what it had 20 years ago, airport concourses, you name it. There's hospitals, churches. There's arms race in everything out there, and certainly athletics in an intercollegiate setting is part of that competition to continually improve facilities. In our case, we know that unless there's some kind of seismic change, we will not have the largest budget in the Big 12. In fact, there's one institution in the league whose budget is 200% more than ours. Okay, but they're still going to have 85 football players on the on scholarship. We're going to have 85 football players on scholarship. They're going to have 8 women's tennis players on scholarship. We're going to have 8 women's tennis players on scholarship. And one way or another, we're going to find a way to win our share. The biggest checkbook does not always win. And certainly when we talk about some of the goals that I've tried to articulate over the last month since I was appointed, having a model intercollegiate athletics program is not defined solely by size of budget or size of facilities, et cetera. And I'm very, very optimistic that we can have a model intercollegiate athletics program that provides great value to the institution, and most importantly, provides a great student-athlete experience for the student-athletes who come through our program.
Tuition rates are going up to 3.9%. That's the smallest in the state, correct? What are you going to do to keep that at an all-time low, or at a low, for our K-State students?
I'm going to buy a color printer that will print off money. Tim, I know you asked that as a serious question. I think one of the things that we're going to do over the next year, and I've got to talk to the vice presidents, but we're going to put in place a team of folks, and I know there's several groups out there doing this already, but over the first quarter, the first 3 months of the fiscal year, we're going to be going out across campus trying to get all the wonderful ideas we can get about how we might be able to save some money or things that we might be able to do slightly differently or consolidations or whatever. I want to sort of have everything on the table. And that's been done before. Most of you have probably been engaged with tossing out ideas. Then the second quarter, we're going to put in place, do a lot of financial analysis on those things. And that's been sort of the missing component. Because say I decide it's great to combine widget engineering and wind science, and I think, okay, this is going to be great. And it's hard to figure out two departments that don't actually exist. So, because otherwise everybody get paranoid. Oh my God, did you hear what Kirk said? Anyway, you put those two together and somebody says we're going to save lots of money and needless program duplication, all that. Then you do some financial analysis and you come down and say, okay, we're going to save $5,000 and there's no pedagogical reason. It's not like we're going to improve the student educational experience or research opportunities. To be honest, we need to pull those off the list because spending lots of time arguing about something that is not either educationally relevant or is going to save us money, it's just a waste of time and energy. Anyway, so we're going to take those, and then I hope by January 1, thereabouts, we have sort of a prioritized list of different things that we think are going to be critical for us to do. And at that point, then we can wait and see what the state will do to us to help support our educational enterprise. And we can then, from that list, then be a little more proactive. And what I don't want to be is a situation in April where we're watching the legislature and we see those numbers come in and then panic sets in. And then the administration and the faculty and staff working together and students, all of a sudden then we're making hasty decisions where you all come back and say, how come we didn't think about this a little bit more? Why are we trying to do it in 4 weeks when we've had 9 months to really be working through it? So will the discussions be difficult and challenging? Absolutely. There's no easy answers. But if 1,500 of the smartest people can't figure out some of this stuff, I don't know who can. Okay, so the bottom line is that's what we're going to have to do to prep ourselves budget-wise. We can no longer balance our budget by seeing what's going to happen from the state and jacking tuition up to fill that. I mean, the affordability index becomes a real problem. So that's what we're going to do is to make sure that we keep our tuition increases, within what I think families in Kansas can afford to pay. And we're probably already outside of what they can afford to pay, so we just have to be very careful. That's a long answer, but it's a complex question. So we'll see how the budget treats us this next year. But we're going to be very proactive, and folks, all of you will have a chance to be involved and engaged in a very positive way, I hope, in those discussions. They won't be, me coming up on stage with a matching envelope, opening it up and popping out, here's what we're going to do for the budget. There'll be a lot of discussion about this over the next 6 months.
Oh, we got 2 questions. Good. You got there first. Go ahead.
I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you for being here and doing this. I appreciate your openness, and I want to say to everyone here, I had a lot of respect for the past administration, and they did a lot of great things for K-State. And this audit kind of put a little damper on that, but at the same time, they did a lot of great things here, and I appreciate that. I'm interested to see where we're going. I've heard you talk about 2025, the vision of K-State, where you see us going, and I know you're probably still thinking about that, but maybe you could give us a taste on where you think K-State's going and how we're going to get there by 2025.
What he's referring to is I've been out talking to lots of groups about developing a long-term strategic plan for the institution and trying to look and see where K-State would be in the year 2025. And it's 15 years out. I mean, that's plus 2025 just sounds better than 2026. But anyway.
And I would just interject that again is the difference between a president and an athletic director. He's trying to forecast to 2025. I'm trying to make it to June 25.
And it's June 29th, so never mind. I do a little better job of reference checking. Okay.
That's been my joke. It's now July 25.
There'll be a lot of information that'll come out in the fall semester, but essentially we're going to do something on the order of, we'll do a lot of focus. It'll be strategic planning different than most of you have experienced. We will not have a 35-member committee that's going to be tasked with developing a strategic plan. Those largely don't work very well. What we will do, though, is we'll have a lot of focus groups that are going to be in different, we may have them at the departmental level, and we're going to do it across the university. We're going to do stuff with alumni, donors, faculty, staff, students, and so on, where we'll pose a couple questions. Where would we like to be? What are the hurdles to get there? 2 or 3 things like this, and we'll have these groups come up with this. We'll document all that, and then what's going to happen is we'll have about 50 of those, and some themes are going to emerge on what the university ought to look like, and maybe we pick international programs or internationalization. I had an exciting meeting today talking about our first year experience. What should that look like? What should our research enterprise look like? Anyway, then we'll take a group of folks that'll meet one time. They'll spend a day looking at those and picking out the major themes. And by this point, we're going to have a reasonable document that'll start having some thematic areas in there where we, as a faculty and as a community, think that we could be going. Then we'll have then we'll actually have some groups that'll actually meet to focus upon those particular themes. And that'll be over 6 months. So I think by July 1 of 2010, we'll have a draft, if you want to put it that way, of a lot of these particular things. Then the key step is we're going to put it out to the university community and say, what do you think? Okay, and that'll happen as a bunch of you will come back and say, Kirk, that is the best strategic plan I have ever seen. Okay, then after I talk to my children, the rest of you will say, well, you forgot this needs some work, I don't think this is the right direction, and so on. And so then we go through another modification step, and I can't emphasize how important that particular part is, because then it's not, well, yeah, we got all this input, Kirk sat down in his office, he typed something up, and that's what our plan is. After that, we'll put out hopefully something that's fairly abbreviated, and I'd like it to be 10 pages or less, with a 1-page or less summary, and that's going to be what we're going to use for fundraising and resource allocation and things like that over the next several years. So that's a quick snapshot, but I don't have, this is exactly what we're going to do. I think that doesn't ever work. I can have some ideas, but you all have some ideas too, and we got to kind of put them all together. So will we get something that 100% of the people like? Never. It's faculty and staff, it'll never be 100%. You get 3 of us in a room and it's hard for us to agree. So I think what we want, though, is something that people said, I participated, I agree generally with the direction that we're going, and I have some confidence that this is where K-State needs to go. And we're going to go through a tough budget year and some of that, and you say, well, why don't we get through that? The time for doing some planning is now, so that as resources come back in, we don't just say, let's go fill in holes. We need to make sure that we're filling in the right holes. And so now is a great time for us to really be thinking about the future of the institution. And to be honest, we need some, it's good to, sometimes when you're standing in a mud pit, to look up at the top of the mountain. You need to do that occasionally, and I think this is going to be part of what I think is going to be important for us, so that we don't get discouraged about the state state budget situation and our financial challenges that we're gonna have over the next year. So, yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. This is a question for you, President Schulz. Will the university establish a policy that prohibits us from loaning money to individuals?
I loaned John $20 earlier today. I bet that doesn't count, does it? Yeah, I mean, we're not a bank. We will not be a bank. We are not in the process of loans. The only loaning type of things that we do, and most of you are familiar with this, is so, for example, College of Agriculture is trying to finish a complex, and the foundation will provide them a loan to finish a facility. That's the kind of stuff that we'll do, but we will never do another personal, individual loan again. That's bad practice, and I can tell you that's not going to happen. Can I have my $20 back? Okay. It should be 21 with interest. Okay.
Hi. Under these tough economic times, departments have been looking for creative ways to generate resources, and we're moving into arrangements similar to what athletics doing with not-for-profits and those sorts of things. You're seeing people kind of venture into those boundaries where we're not just running our programs off state tax dollars. We're having to get involved in these types of arrangements with not-for-profits and corporations and those sorts of things. I'm just curious, did the audit look at all the arrangements K-State has with some of these not-for-profit organizations, or did it just focus on NISTAC and athletics and a few?
It just focused on several areas by Board of Regents policy. They were supposed to look, I believe, at the President's Office, athletics, the foundation, and the Alumni Association. So that was the scope of their particular activities. But in general, okay, aside from some of those issues identified, public universities are continuing to be less public all the time. In my home state of Virginia, the University of Virginia, which is a tremendous, Virginia Tech grads, it's hard for me to say this publicly, but is a tremendous academic institute, gets something like less than 5% of their budget now from the state of Virginia. They are essentially, for all practical purposes, a private institution. Unfortunately, I think we're going to continue to see major publics like us and KU and Wichita State see that percentage of our state support from the state eroding over time. My point is that we want to be credible, but we want to be creative, and we're going to have to take on a more private style of university atmosphere if we're going to be successful in the future, so that when we start new initiatives, we're going to have to look and say, can we actually go raise money to help us do this? Now, should we have to do it that way? That's a philosophical argument. I think most of us would say no, that ought to be supported. The practical side is, I think that's what we're going to have to do in the future, because that number is only going to get smaller, and as we prepare ourselves that way, it'll just help us to weather these kind of downturns, so that you've got, for example, University of Oregon has really been very assertive and aggressive about how they've done with their private fundraising, and essentially they weather the ups and downs of the Oregon economy pretty well for a state institution. We've got to move ourselves in that direction, which means you need to expect me and our deans and department heads and so forth to be out there aggressively making friends and raising resources to do the educational enterprise that we need to do. Long answer to a simple question, but so the audit was very focused on 4 areas. But we need to make sure we're using best business practices, but being creative. Okay. Well, folks, we didn't want this to drag on forever. I will say that I won't have my sidekick here, but we're going to do these several times during the year, so hopefully we can have some where we just have a chance, and I'll sit up here. If there's only 3 of you here, that's great, but we'll probably do these once a semester where I just want to have the opportunity. You can bring up whatever you would like to, and if you hear it in public like this, you feel that there's got to be, it's hard for me to go, ooh, I forgot. But I appreciate everybody coming, and folks, we appreciate the support, and as you have suggestions and things, email us, stop us in the hallway, find us at the airport, wherever you can, and let us know what your suggestions are. So, folks, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you very much.